Your mortgage rate is currently sitting around 6.5%, but here's the thing. It actually wasn't chosen by your bank or even the Fed. It was determined by a completely invisible machine that quietly prices your car loan, your job security, and yes, your retirement account. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to completely demystify the invisible machinery that quietly dictates your personal financial security. Today, we are deconstructing the bond market so you can understand exactly what its moves cost you in real hard dollars. Just to wrap our heads around the staggering scale of this thing, we are talking about a $145 trillion market. It's a machine so incredibly massive that back in 2022, it caused the quote-unquote safe part of millions of retirement accounts to lose roughly 16% in a single year. So, Section 1. The basics. What is a bond? Let's quickly dive into what fuels this massive money machine. At its absolute core, a bond is simply a loan. See, when a government or a large corporation needs money, they don't always walk into a bank. Instead, they borrow it directly from investors like you and me. You hand over a fixed amount of cash, which we call the principal. And in return for your cash, they promise you two very simple things. First, you get a fixed interest payment every single year, known as the coupon. Second, you get your original investment back on a very specific date, known as maturity. And really, that's the entire instrument in a nutshell. Moving on to Section 2, the golden rule of bonds. To understand how this machine actually moves your money, we have to establish its one non-negotiable rule. The absolute most crucial point you need to remember is this seesaw effect. When interest rates rise, the price of existing bonds falls. And when rates fall, prices rise. They move in opposite directions every single time. Absolutely no exceptions. To see the logic here, just imagine you own a $1,000 bond paying 3%. That's $30 a year. But then the government suddenly issues brand new bonds paying 5% or $50 a year. Well, nobody in their right mind is going to buy your 3% bond for the full $1,000 when they can get a new one paying way more. To actually sell yours, you have to drop your asking price all the way down to maybe $600 just to make the yield competitive again. You haven't lost your future payments, but on paper, your investment value just plummeted. Section 3. Pricing your mortgage. Let's talk about how this macro machinery creates massive, invisible expenses right at your kitchen table. The single most important bond in the world is the 10-year U.S. Treasury. When your bank sets your mortgage rate, they literally look at that 10-year yield and just add roughly 2 percentage points to cover the risk that you might default. Let's look at our fictional homebuyer, Brian, taking out a $400,000 mortgage. Because of a totally routine market shift in the Treasury yield from 2021 to 2023, Brian's monthly payment shot from $1,612 up to $2,877. Over 30 years, that forces him to pay an agonizing $455,349 more for the exact same house. It is wild when you think about it. The bond market literally handed Brian a $500,000 bill without ever sending an invoice. And even smaller moves are brutal. A mere 0.5% rise costs him almost $48,000 over the life of the loan, and a full 1% rise costs him nearly $97,000. It's absolutely staggering when you see the math laid out like this. Section 4. The Great 2022 Crash. Because honestly, this invisible force doesn't just crush borrowers. We need to examine the historic carnage it unleashed on savers. For decades, the classic 60-40 portfolio, that's 60% stocks, 40% bonds, was the quote-unquote safe, sensible default for retirees. Bonds were supposed to be the financial seatbelt. But in 2022, as the Fed raised rates at the fastest pace in 40 years, the bond seatbelt totally crashed. Rates rose so fast that prices completely collapsed. For long-duration bonds, 2022 was actually their worst year since 1754. Seriously, let that sink in. Before the United States even existed, America's safe portfolio sleeve had its worst year in over 2.5 centuries. Now, the secret to knowing exactly how much danger your own retirement is in comes down to a single, completely overlooked number called duration. It is a rough estimate of how much a bond fund will lose for every 1% rise in interest rates. Here's why duration matters so much. If you have a $500,000 portfolio and your fund has a duration of 6, a 1% rate hike costs you $30,000. But if that duration is 17, that exact same 1% hike costs you $85,000. That is literally the difference between a small bruise and a broken leg. Section 5. predicting the future. Believe it or not, the bond market is actually better at predicting the future than most economists. Usually, long-term 30-year loans pay a higher interest rate than short 3-month ones. We call this a normal yield curve, and it makes intuitive sense, right? You lock your money up longer, you get paid more. But when short-term yields actually spike higher than long-term yields, an event called an inverted yield curve, the market is flashing the ultimate warning signal. To prove how incredibly powerful this economic check engine light is, the San Francisco Fed found that an inverted yield curve preceded every single U.S. recession since 1955. That is a perfect 10 for 10 track record. No other economic indicator even comes close to that kind of crystal ball accuracy. Section 6. Mastering your money. Finally, let's pivot to some highly practical math you can use to protect your savings right now. See, most savers just leave their cash sitting in standard bank accounts, earning a pitiful 0.38%, completely ignoring the alternatives. Meanwhile, 3-month T-bills or high-yield savings accounts are paying closer to 4% for the exact same level of safety. T-bills are backed by the U.S. government, high-yield accounts are FDIC insured. It's the same safety, but a dramatically different yield. Let's bring Brian back in. By settling for that standard bank account with a $50,000 balance, Brian is throwing away over $8,000, exactly $8,325 to be precise, in lost interest over just 5 years. He could have safely collected that without taking on any extra risk whatsoever. And hey, if inflation is your primary worry right now, you should look into Series I savings bonds. They're the most direct hedge available to regular savers, currently paying over 4%, while automatically adjusting to match the rising cost of living. The bond market isn't just for the wealthy. It's the check engine light of our economy, and it touches every single dollar in your financial life, from your mortgage to your retirement. Understanding the math behind it is the difference between being a victim of the machine and mastering it. So, if this explainer helped you connect the dots, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the math of your money. And be sure to check the link in the description for the Wealth Logician's Calculator Vault so you can run these numbers on your own life and calculate exactly how bond moves are affecting your specific mortgage and savings. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.